Should I always validate my woman's emotions? She seems really upset, and it's something that I actually didn't intend to do. She's totally off base, but my therapist or common pop psychology is telling me that I'm always supposed to validate her. Is that the case? Are there any exceptions? Yes, absolutely, there are exceptions. So, when to not validate her emotions because it won't help is our topic here today. And by the end of this call, I'm going to give you three specific things that you can say in response or in reply to when you're uncertain or when she's going off on something that you feels totally off base, or it's been cycling over and over and over, and you don't want to continue to try the same strategy that's not working. So we're going to talk about that today. Welcome to the C Note Show with myself, Jeff Allen, and Cynthia Cruz. We teach how to love and lead with mojo like a king in long-term monogamous relationship between a man and a woman. She wants safety, inspiration, and sexual leadership with you and from you, and that's what we teach. And we also teach how to avoid big mistakes before they happen and how to solve problems after they're here. That's what we do. It's what Cynthia and I are professionals in. It's been going on 7 years in private practice now, full time working with men. So when to not validate her emotions because it won't help. I'm going to bounce to Cynthia first, and then I have an article from Psychology Today. Do not validate unexamined emotions by Dr. Catherine Aponte. We're going to speak about that today. So Cynthia, just off the cuff, right? I haven't prepared Cynthia for this question. In your professional opinion, and what you see in your women's groups and when you speak with women in particular, when do you think it's not the best idea to validate her outlandish experience? I'll use that word on purpose, outlandish, because if a man were watching this and he just simply validates her and then she relaxes and thanks him and swoons for him and becomes more soft and kind and hugs him, then he wouldn't be curious about when to not validate her because it would be working. It would be fine. But if there's an outlandish cycling, circling emotional experience that she's having, especially that she beats him up for, blames him up for, when may not be a time to validate that? Talk with us about that to start us off.
I feel like it's a difficult landscape to navigate. I would say not validating is a really good way to create a pattern break. So you use the word cycling over and over, and I know women do this in their attempt to really excavate an emotion they're really feeling. They can bring up the same story over and over again because they're looking for some outcome, either to have almost an emotional release on their own part, as if it's kind of an addictive feeling to get an emotional response out, or she's using it to get a certain emotional response from you that she then uses as a power play. Regardless, it's not an experience she's using to flush out what she's feeling and be open to connection with you. So, not validating is a way to put up a boundary. It reminds me of our emotions can be like the horse running free of the corral. We could even say that not validating in some instances is closing the gate on the corral so that the horse isn't running off into the wilds and breaking its leg or catching itself on barbed wire. It can be a really loving and caring and eagle eye view of what's going on and what really protects the situation.
Yeah, that's very well said. Thank you. We're going to get into all that today. Gentlemen, if you're here live, I want you to punch into the chat, at least punch number one into the chat if you've ever faced a situation like this. I chuckle because I think every guy has a situation like this where she is spiraling, or you're curious if this is some type of addictive power play, or she's trying to unconsciously, even not necessarily purposefully, cultivate a certain situation with you. And if you would, type a few words into the chat about what that is as well. Raise your hand in Zoom if you'd like to come in and talk about anything that we go through. So I'm going to go through quickly because I pulled a few excerpts. This is definitely not the entire article. So Dr. Catherine Aponte, do not validate unexamined emotions. Emotions are clues to one way we experience our world. It's popular to advise people that to interact effectively with another person, it's important to validate their feelings and emotions. It's said that doing so can facilitate good interactions because it tells others that you understand them and value their experience. However, there should be caution about this advice. Therapists, counselors, and helpers note that while you are validating emotional experience, you are not necessarily agreeing with what their emotion is about, nor that the emotion they are feeling is warranted. This woman's concern, this doctor of psychology says, my concern with validating unexamined emotions. As a psychologist who has worked for many years with couples, my interest is in the emotions experienced in interactions between people in intimate relationships and how to effectively deal with them. So, what is effective? Not just what's nice or appeases her in the moment. It's what's actually effective in growing deep relationship together. Quickly, she says she has three concerns about the advice to validate any emotional reaction without examining the personal experience of both people in each given interactions. So here's the key to this article is examining your past personal experience in relation to the current emotion that you're having. So first bullet is how do you validate without agreeing? Second bullet is when you validate, you stop the other person from reflecting on the situation. And third bullet is the views of emotion that support this kind of advice are outdated thoughts. And there's much about brain research in the article that I did not include today. So if you'd like to actually read this article, psychologytoday.com, search do not validate unexamined emotions, and you'll find this article. An example of an emotional interaction between a married couple. Sarah and Lucas, who had been married a few years, were sitting together after dinner one evening when Sarah began talking about a difficult situation she had at work. Lucas, perhaps caught up in his own thoughts, did not respond to his wife, Sarah. She reacts emotionally with, how can you ignore me like that? I work so hard to be nice to you. Sarah is angry at Lucas, which justifies, in her mind, it justifies her accusing him of ignoring her. And she adds this layer some guilt on there too. If Lucas were to validate her anger, he might say something like, I understand your anger. And then, but I didn't ignore you would be, if we had the but on the end, that's not something that Cynthia and I would recommend. But if he said, I understand your anger, even that response satisfies Sarah, but it misses so much of this interaction that could be useful to the couple. And here's the problem. Sarah interpreted Lucas's silence as him ignoring her without cross-checking with him why he had been silent. So she makes an assumption, and this is her interpretation, that he's ignoring her. Interpreting his silence as ignoring implies he intended to be silent, and that justifies her anger. So that's the story in her mind. And you cannot validate her anger without also validating her unexamined take on the event. So before I go on, Cynthia, I can just imagine some men thinking, okay, if I don't validate her emotions and I'm trying to ultimately have her examine her interpretation of the event, that just sounds like a giant argument waiting to happen. We're going to get more into this too, and we'll get into what to say toward the end of the call, certainly. But if I stop validating, let's say I was, kind of kissing her butt, walking on eggshells, say I'm Lucas here, and Sarah in the past has had these upsets. And what's really helped is me just to say, you're right. I'm sorry. I'm such a horrible I'm exaggerating, but oh, it's all my fault. You're totally justified in being angry at me. It must be really hard to feel ignored like that. And really just validate, but that has not worked. She's not happy. After the interaction is done, she's still pissed off and closed down. She beats him over the head for something like this. So let me ask, why is just validating not fix it? If I'm a guy and I'm trying to learn how to fix this with my wife, Sarah, why does that not fix it? What's going on in her mind if he does what I was just describing, please?
Yeah, what it hits me is that we all come to relationships with a certain story in our head, and one of the stories often women carry is how listening is supposed to be, or how communication is supposed to be from her own sphere of what it's like to be a woman, and that is a story that can cause her a lot of pain. She's always looking through that lens. And so if that story she's created is being validated over and over, there isn't any room for the feminine in her to expand and feel polarity and understand some of the differences and nuances of your masculinity, and then in effect understand the depth of your masculinity and the presence that you really do have that is exponentially beyond what she thinks the story should be or what she thinks communication should be based on interactions with girlfriends or even the story of in popular culture.
So let me ask, how can a man start this new way of working and thinking and approaching? Should he? I'll taint my question. Should he overly explain this? Okay, so from now on, I'm gonna not validate you as much and blah blah mansplain. Should probably not. So why shouldn't he overly explain logically? And what if she starts getting upset because he's no longer feeding the old addiction of the spiraling righteousness?
Yeah, I mean, the over explaining the logic of it, women can't help but take that in as not caring about what she's saying and feeling. And so even just taking logic off the table helps the situation forward. It's okay if she feels something not positive when validating energy shifts to something else. And it's okay if it causes her some extra pain or causes her some extra frustration. Again, it's like the there's a pattern break and there's an opportunity here for newness, shifts in the patterns between the two of you, if not shifts in the patterns between even systems that have been part of her family that she's carried into relationship with you. So negative emotion is not bad. It is an opportunity for, again, something new and different. And to me, that's even healthier than her always being satisfied by your response or affirmation of her.
Yeah, thank you. Good stuff. Well said. Yeah, there's men in the chat giving examples. One week I needed to sell our house and move to the city, and the next week we needed to renovate our house. So, what these spiraling concerns are about. Yeah. How much hurt I've caused her is what I hear about regularly. Yeah. There are criticisms she raised towards me about issues she's had with me for years, but never once raised them with me over a decade. They built up into a nasty resentment. And while I understand her original concerns, I don't take accountability for issues that she's had that I was never made aware of. And the man says he agrees. My wife did the same of bringing up criticisms years later, a month later, a week later, a day later, rarely in the moment. I didn't do a good job of validating her emotions back then. I would retreat like a little boy. Yeah, thank you guys for opening these things. Of course, we teach what to do in a fairly normal situation of validating her, caring for her, seeing what her emotional reactions are. So, is she moving more or is she moving less? Talk with us about what are the indicators of a woman feeling safe, understood with more movement versus holding her breath or less movement. Why is that important for a guy to watch?
Yeah. And that's hits me very poignantly because again in our popular culture we might say that stillness is meditative, being grounded and being present, but for the feminine, her suddenly getting really still or restricting her movement or holding her breath, it can speak to a freeze response that she's having. And like I even feel like my whole chest and solar plexus tightening, like she's tightening down because she's either feeling the need to protect herself or almost to make herself invisible. And again, those things are not meant to say that she shouldn't experience them. And in fact, I would want her to show some freeze or her fight mode in front of you so that there can be a practice of getting her to breathe again and move again with you. Because the more she moves, she's showing that she's in the grasses in the hunting land and she knows that there's no saber-toothed tigers approaching.
Yeah, thank you. And part of her expressing is you have to be ready for it, not to collapse. And that's what a huge piece of this men's work is clarity, confidence, certainty in your own self. All right, let's keep moving forward. The sensory basis of emotions. Our brains do come pre-wired to experience feelings, but not emotions. So our brains are pre-wired to experience feelings, but those are not emotions. You can have feelings like calmness and agitation, excitement, comfort, and discomfort. These feelings are ongoing monitors of what is going on. They represent changes on a continuum of arousal in one direction and pleasantness and unpleasantness on the other hand, shown in the diagram below. So these are feelings: low arousal, high arousal, pleasant, unpleasant. Our brains are pre-wired to experience these. But emotions are culturally determined overlays of this basic aspect of how we monitor our world, based on our past experiences and in an anticipation of how to act. So the feelings keep track of what's going on in your internal and external worlds, and that's your affect. But emotions are culturally determined overlays based on past experiences. So rethinking the validation of our emotions. Remember the idea that you can validate someone's emotion without necessarily agreeing what their emotion is about, nor that the emotion they are feeling is warranted. This is misleading. When we validate someone's emotion, we are validating their take on the current situation based on their own personal history. There's no such thing as validating an isolated emotion independent of the event in which it happens and your personal take on it. So, for instance, real quick story, she accused someone in his family of basically embezzling funds, this kind of giant accusation. And if he didn't basically agree and validate her, she immediately said he was gaslighting her and he wasn't on her side. He even went to such lengths to get receipts to prove that what she was accusing his family member of was not true. And at the end, when he basically proved it, she absolutely lost her shit and was personal attacking him, like outrageous, crazy stuff, when he sort of proved that what she was saying wasn't true. Now, I don't know her particular past or what what she was unconsciously trying to drive toward there, but solving what is an emotional upset with logic doesn't work. Yeah. And so in that situation, what would you say is first of all a go-to for a man when it really feels like she's accusing him of something that he didn't do? And if he tries to defend himself, now he's gaslighting her.
Mhm.
What would you say is your immediate go-to? And we'll share some more by the end of this call too, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a painful story to hear, like painful for the man. And then I so much about the divine feminine and sacred relationships is inviting a woman to be in a place of intuition and share her intuition and be muse. And so when I hear these very like human and knock kneed bends on how this woman's like mistreating what should be a really fun experience in relationship by accusation like that. It makes me say, as much as when I'm working with a woman, I want to have her practice listening to her own intuition despite like work through the emotional baggage so she can get to her intuition. In that situation, it's like, where is your gut as a man and what the masculine knows to be true? And nothing, no weather pattern can affect that gut knowing. And there's a solidness when you are listening to your gut, when you see like, this is her stuff, this is a story that she's cultivating, creating, that can't be changed right now. Your solidness in just observing that and knowing the truth inside of you in a very physical level can actually have a more of an impact on that situation than trying to reel her in or try to figure out why she's justifying this, or even trying to nod in a sacred way to, her feminine intuition, which is totally not aligned in that moment.
Please, thanks for raising your hand.
About this, there are certain factual things that just sometimes aren't true, and they're very provably inaccurate. And it's one thing to understand that, hey, you feel this way and you can validate that, but then there's certain real world outcomes that can from what decisions she might be making based on this inaccurate information, right? And so there's a couple of guys that talked last night, and there's certain things, and I understand what you're saying about finding that truth within you, and you know that truth, and you can ground yourself in that and know that, and there's a confidence and a knowing inside of you. But at the same time, where I'm at on my journey right now, I can't seem to get past certain inaccuracies and certain just blatantly wrong things that have informed her and created, and she's spreading certain things around, and like, you go and see other parents, and I can just see it in their face, the way they say hi, it's different from before, and I know that she's told them this inaccurate information, and it's affecting my social circle. Like, I wasn't invited to someone else's Christmas party, and like, just stuff like that. And it just starts to gnaw at you a little bit. And it's like, I can know who I am and know the truth within me, but how do I navigate those real world ramifications of these inaccuracies that come from these emotions that she's having? I can validate her all day long, but then aside from that, there's certain things that are just factually incorrect. And I haven't bridged that gap yet on how to just walk that line and walk that walk without getting all, internal storm about it. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah, that's a valid point. So let me bring up two things and let's talk about this. So one is, assume that she's never going to see things from your point of view. Like, assume that you're not going to try to talk her into your way of seeing things. Let's assume that. And the second is, well, what do you have control over? You don't have necessarily control over what people's judgments are going to be. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So how would you want to move forward with those factors in place? What do you want to do?
I mean, a lot of different things pop in my head when you say that. What do I want to do? I want to, jump on a fishing boat to freaking Okinawa and never come back. I want to go back in time and, with Dr. Emmett Brown and fix some things. I don't know. I really. But in the end, the realistic thing, I can know who I am and sit with that and know my truth and have my truth and speak my truth should the opportunity come up. If someone approaches me, hey, she told me this. Is that? Oh, I wanted to hear your side of the story. Sure, I'm happy to share. But aside from that, I mean, I'll talk to you guys and just live my truth and see what the universe brings me. I don't know what else to do.
Yeah. Well, that's well said. That there's two layers in my view of what you're talking about. There's the top layer of how I interact with the world, and there's the underneath layer of what I believe about my own self and about life. So for instance, as a recovering nice guy, as most of us are here, right? As a previous nice guy, I used to think that I could make it so no one was upset with me, that everyone was on the same page with me, that everyone wants good things and we all share the same values. And while that sounds nice, and that's, sounds like a great Disney movie, script for a Disney movie, that's not how things are. And there's plenty of people that aren't going to agree with me. And how butthurt do I get about that? How righteous do I get about that within my own self has been a gigantic learning. To put it simply, some people are not going to like me. And how do I handle that within my own self? Am I in turmoil about that? Am I, losing sleep about that? And what is that about me where I think everyone needs to agree with me and like me? Now, that's not exactly what you're saying. If you're all of a sudden not invited to your best, closest friend's Christmas party because she says some outlandish thing about you, obviously that's super painful. But my point about the underneath is, do I immediately have revulsion when people don't like me just off of that principle? Or am I growing to be okay if some people at face value misjudge me? How do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fair question. I never really been one to try to like, oh, so and so doesn't like me, like whatever, that's on them. I never really had that concern. But when people are making decisions and judgments towards me based on erroneous information, I mean, blatantly incorrect information that has been, she's obviously going through some turmoil, and I have empathy for that, and there's something going on. But when her solution to her turmoil is not to look inward and figure out what's her issue is, it's to throw me under the bus anytime she can, that's really painful. And I don't know how to process that. I don't know how to feel about that other than it sends me down the dark road of, anger and resentment and, all that kind of stuff. And then when other people are making their decisions based on her issues that also, I don't know, it sucks, really sucks.
Yeah, it does really suck. Absolutely. Talk for a minute about the Hawaiian prayer. Where's the Ho'oponopono and forgiveness? So there's a prayer, there's a meditation. So what do? We can only control our own selves. So we can stay in. And by the way, there's many people around the world that have horrible accusations like slighted against them, right? That are on and on and on. So it's not a comparison, but what do we do for ourselves? How do we heal our own selves? Talk for a minute about that Hawaiian prayer.
What you're describing just sounds excruciating. And the desire to, I can even feel in my own body, like the desire to fix the story, especially if someone I know, like it's so honorable and has the values that you do. There is the practice is called Ho'oponopono. And
I've heard of it. Yeah.
What have you heard of it, or how has hit you?
Tell me what you think it is. I've just heard the Ho'oponopono. I've heard the word, but I don't know exactly the thing behind it. So go for it.
It's like the one Hawaiian word we keep in our clothes.
Yeah.
Yes, everyone knows that. It's kind of based on the idea that there is something in us that is seeking to be healed by these kind of interactions, that part of us is even asking for it to appear in the other so we can heal it ourselves. And so there's a practice of even loving that one cell of the person that we can who's showing up for us in that way, waving the flag that we most want to color and wrap around us. And so the phrasing it starts with, I'm sorry, because it's saying to that type of person, to that part of the person that hey, that part of you that's the worst, I've asked you to pull this out, and I'm sorry that this needs to be pulled out. I'm sorry. And please forgive me that this is the lesson I've chosen to learn right now, and that you're the dancer in this with me. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. And I love you. So I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. And I love you. And they could even be the reflection of ourselves, the reflection of me in the mirror that's asking for this lesson. Like, God damn it. I'm sorry you're having to learn this lesson. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you for showing up in this way for me. And they could be visualizing them. And there's so much like fire and angst I've felt in my own self doing that. And yet there can be a powerful shift when that's the intent.
Yeah, no, that is really powerful. I know there were some meditations I did like, a year ago when things were really, really, really rough waters. And there was one that I did that was that exact thing. And man, it was tough. That was a challenge for sure. That's definitely finding an edge there to find that apology and gratitude, seeking forgiveness. And it's tough.
Yeah. To me, that practice is for us, for you as a man, not to necessarily take to her.
Oh yeah, no, I totally get that. Yeah. Like, I mean,
Right.
I just, I have issues with my dad and, finding a forgiveness for him, even though he's passed 10 years ago, it's still important to do that. That was for me, and that's been part of my journey this past few years. And that was really healing, and I get it.
Yeah.
But it's still she's alive and I have to see her every day and we text all the time. In fact, she's texted me twice and called during this call. And I'm just like, oh God,
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. This is really good. Yeah. Thanks for bringing it up. Yeah.
Like if we had more time, I would even say, would you practice with me? And I not that we have the time, but even going through some of this stuff alone is so tough. Sometimes even if it's just a trusted mentor or friend, like, hey, can you sit and be this energy for me? Then I would imagine that like the masculine is not alone on the hunt and not alone facing the tiger or the dragon. So that's just an offering of following up on what you said.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks. Let's take a step forward. And part of within all of us is how are we maybe accidentally calling that back into our life over and over? And that's a hard question to ask ourselves. And that's a bit of what we're talking about right now. So let's move forward and finish up. Emotional experience calls for self-reflection, not validation. Let's find out how Sarah and Lucas can solve the disruption in their relationship. In the interaction described earlier with Sarah and Lucas, Lucas is likely to respond with something like, I don't know what you're talking about, because he doesn't know how to respond to Sarah's anger and her characterizing him as ignoring her. So that's more of the truth of his experience. He doesn't know what she's talking about. Okay, I'm going to give you some more specific things to say here in a moment. Self-reflection is the best way for this couple to manage this emotional interaction. Being self-reflective means learning to be aware when you're angry, fearful, or feeling hurt. It means you recognize you need to step back for a few minutes to reflect rather than act on the emotion. Lucas's surprised reaction to Sarah's angry complaint is a clue to her to step back to ask herself, wait, Sarah, what's going on? Why are you so angry? And now I can hear, oh, okay. We're going to try to get a woman to be self-reflective. Good luck, Jeff. Well, the piece of this is number one, and I'm speaking to myself. Have you been self-reflective in the past? Have you been aware of your emotions, or have you just had knee-jerk, defensive, angry, vomiting emotional responses? Because if that's the case, you aren't doing what you're wanting. You aren't leading and being self-reflective. That's why this work has to begin with us. Okay. And then as you practice this, she is going to challenge you and be upset because you're no longer playing into the old spiraling, dynamic, potentially kind of addictive power situation that she's hopefully inadvertently creating with you. So yeah, at first she's going to be pissed that you're not feeding the tank like you have in the past. But the point here is to not engage and fuel the fire, and then move into a space as a couple where you can reflect on these things, where you can slow down, where you're not as reactive, where she can have her own agency within herself, but also not blame you as much, and see you with more respect and see you with higher regard without trying to fix her. That's where we're going here. Recognizing the need to step back for a few minutes to reflect rather than act on the emotion, because again, the emotion is associated with the past. Reflection allows our brain to pause during strong emotions to sort through what you are experiencing, to sort out the many interpretations of what is going on between you and the one that you love, and to sort out what is going on inside of you. Reflection can inform your future reactions in face of high arousal and unpleasant interactions. So again, why is this so emotionally powerful for her or for me? What is it beyond just this moment? What you can validate, what you want to validate in others and have validated for yourself. And the short version is here, what you've experienced in the past. Lucas will want to validate Sarah's sensitivity around not being listened to from the past. He can be, from her childhood, say. He can be aware that when she gets angry at him, that it may not be about what he actually did, but her experience of what he did that's encoded by the past. This will help him not react, but be proactive in talking with her. All right, so what do I say? And then we'll go over to Cynthia before we close out today. What do I say? Okay, instead of validating her, instead of being defensive is never a great idea. Instead of validating her if it's something that's spiraling or you feel that she's playing upon over and over again, or it's based off something erroneous, it's based off some kind of false situation she's experienced in the past, you can say, first thing is, I'm confused. Help me understand. Another thing you can say is, what do you mean? Tell me more. And thirdly, if those aren't working, or if you feel like you're being relentlessly attacked in the moment, you want to not engage as best possible. You've heard this before, but I want you to say, let me think about that and I'll come back. I'll come back to you to talk about this tonight at 8 o'clock or Saturday morning, because I'm confused and I want to understand. Tell me more about that. And if she, in this instance, if it's the woman, if she continues to say the same things over and beat you up, you could say, okay, let me take a break. I'll think about that and let's talk about it. Now, often she'll keep going, and you need to be able to break the pattern and break the situation so that you aren't just the punching bag. And that's where guys get caught up here is, but she's going to be angry at me. So let's close this out talking about why is it okay that she's angry, as you mentioned even earlier on this call and many other teachings that we've done. Why is it okay that she be upset and he not try to fix it in that moment? What about that is actually going to help her grow and help lead her toward more healthy relationship?
If I go back to the horse and the corral, if her horse has just been running wild around the field and not having to experience any sort of holding or supporting of the space, even if it's been catching its leg on barbed wire, even if it's been stumbling and getting lame, when you put up that corral enclosure, it's going to be pushing against all the edges until there's like a new normal. I don't want any woman to feel like in a box, like some might say that metaphor is. What I do want her to feel is a new normal where she's not getting a lot out of the, you know, ripping through with barbed wire, that there really is some stability and safety and a way to truly be heard and understood. And that's what I see you doing with this kind of work, is creating the possibility of that true environment for her. And her anger doesn't know that, but it's breaking the pattern. And again, it's allowing for the opportunity of new patterns and new experience.
Yeah, and that's what you want to lead her into, is new patterns, new experiences, adventure together, emotional range. Phenomenal stuff. So, gentlemen, if you have questions about when to use this or your particular situation, certainly reach out to us. If you're watching this on YouTube, put a comment down below, or you can join us on our Facebook group, greatmenmovemountains.com/Facebook, or check out our stuff. We appreciate you being here. We'll see you next week, same time. Thank you, Cynthia. See you next time, guys.